So now we're going to add our rings. They're fairly easy to do. We're just going to go over to Append, and then we're going to pick Ring 3D. And so it should come in as a new subtool. We're going to come down to the bottom, select that subtool, and then now we're going to come down to the Deformation tab. We're going to go to Rotate here, and we're going to try Y and rotate it 90 degrees in Y. Now your rotation value may be different depending on how you cut the actual polysphere initially when we started. And then I'm going to go to the Transpose tool up here, and I'm going to hold Shift and drag it straight up, and then hold Shift and drag, just kind of position it out of the way, and then come over to Size here in the Deformation tab and scale it down until we get it roughly the size we want it to be. And then rotate to the side again, still with Move selected, hold Shift and drag up, and just keep kind of doing this until we get that ring to be roughly the size we want it to be on the object. So it's pretty good. I'm going to move it forward some, so drawing a transpose line out with Shift, holding Shift and clicking the very middle circle to kind of position it up like that. And so something like that. Now if you want this a little bit wider, we can come over here to Size now, and the X, just kind of scale that out so you end up with something like that. And then you can kind of position it to kind of embed a little bit into your object like so. So there we go. And you can, keep moving this until you feel where it's appropriately at on the actual mesh. Now I'm going to generate a second one because I want basically two objects kind of looped together. So I'm just going to duplicate this one real quick, select the new one, and then go back down to rotation here in the Z and rotate it 90 degrees. And then position that with transpose again until it's roughly in the center of that other one. So something like that. There we go. Now we need one more object. So we need that top part that actually connects to the chain. And I'm going to actually generate that shape with a initialized primitive. So to do that, I'm going to come here to Polymesh 3D and click on the star, click again, and choose Cylinder 3D. Now any of these 3D objects, they always have these initialize menus down here at the bottom. So I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, click on Initialize, and then start changing these values here. So I want this to be an open kind of design for where the chain would actually fit through. So I'm going to change this inner radius slider here until we get it somewhat open like that. I don't want it too thin, so I'm going to keep it probably around 60. And then I'm going to change the divide to something around 16, which is a power of 4. So you get something like that. You can kind of see how it looks in the geometry. You can change this divide down quite a bit too, so I'm going to change this to 7 so that it just has one single group of verts down the middle there. So that looks like a pretty good start to our part there. Now I'm going to go back up to our model we're working on, which looks like this, and I'm going to append in now that Cylinder 3D object we just deformed. So just click Append and then choose that Cylinder 3D object. So as you come in something like that, I'm going to scroll down to that object now. I'm going to now rotate this, so I'm just going to drag a transpose line off, rotate and hold Shift, and then go to Move, drag a transpose line up holding Shift, hold Shift and move that part up. And then when you do one more rotation to get this kind of flush with how it'd be on a chain, and we'll move it in rough position, so something like that. Then we'll come down here to the Deformation tab again and make sure X, Y, and Z are all on, and scale this down a little bit, so something like that, and then move this up using the transpose line. And if you hold Alt, you kind of get a screen space kind of freeform move. So it was down here, I hold Alt, just click on it, and it's going to move it in screen space or canvas space up to where I need it to go. So something like that. Now if we look at the actual object again here, you see these are V-shaped kind of elements. So we need to actually taper this in so it actually forms a V. To do that, I'm just going to use the clip brushes really quick. So I'm going to hold Control Shift, and then over here I'm going to select where it says Brush, and I'm going to choose Clip Curve. Now with Clip Curve selected, so you hold Control and Shift, which now should have Clip Curve activated, and you just drag this kind of out on the screen. You're going to get this nice kind of line here. Now I'm just going to hold spacebar to kind of move it into position and roughly create that angle on our object there. Now it's going to clip whatever that shadow area is. So right now if I would release it and clip it, it's going to clip all this portion over here. So we don't want that. We want it to clip on the actual left side here. So I'm just going to hold Alt, which will do a negative clip, and then just release. And you'll end up with it clipped something like that. Now with this side clipped and the other side not clipped, I can come up here now to the Geometry tab and go to Mirror and Weld. And this object is going to work on the x-axis. You may have to change this to see which way it would work on your model. And then we're just going to click that, and it'll update that other side. So now we have both sides in that nice kind of V-cut pattern. So now we can actually come up here to the divide menu here and just divide this a few times to kind of get it to smooth out a little bit. And then now we need to taper this in a little bit. So we're going to come here to the Deformation tab again. We're going to go to the Size menu here. We're going to select Y and scale this, so we get enough that would actually fit around a chain. Then we're going to go back to the transpose line and kind of move it into position like so. So something like that. So that's pretty good. We can now divide this some more in our Geometry tab to kind of get all that kind of areas cleaned up a little bit. And then if we want this to have like a rough edge, we can use those Polish by Features functionality again. So we're going to scroll back down to Subdivision 1. We're going to make sure we're in Draw mode. We're going to hold Control and Shift and change it back to our Select Rectangle. And with our Select Rectangle selected, we're just going to draw a green box in the center of our object here. We're then going to hold Alt, which will make it red, and it's going to hide those inner portions of that mesh. And so what this is going to allow us to do is to set polygroups for this and use the polygroups and the Polish by Features to get those hard edges. So we're going to come down now to the Polygroup tab and do a group visible, and then hold Control Shift and click off to bring back our other pieces. And if we turn on polyframes, you can see now we have 2 polygroups on this object. So now we're going to go back up to the Geometry tab, go to our Subdivision 5. And then we're going to go to this Feature tab. We're going to turn this circle off and then just Polish by Features. And you can see now we're getting that kind of hard lip back on that object that's being established by those polygroups we just set up. So now we have a nice kind of clean piece that actually joins the top of our mesh. And we can do the same thing for these loops as well. So I'm just going to hold Alt and click on the first loop and then divide this. So it's just smooth, and then Alt, click on the second loop, and divide again so it's smooth. So there we have a pretty good representation of our pendant. We can turn on perspective and kind of see it and rotate around it. Now you could add a bunch more sculpting of how this would actually join to this part here, and add different elements of sculpting to the lattice work or the bevels. It all depends on how much you want to do. You can sculpt on this thing forever and make it all ornate and intricate and as perfect as you want it to be. Now I'm going to do one more quick thing here. I'm going to add a quick little chain and then add some noise to the actual metal. So for the chain, we're actually going to use a insert mesh brush. So first going to come up to the cylinder piece here that we cloned off for this very top. We're just going to duplicate that, and then we're going to scroll down a few subdivisions. So we're going to come down to Subdivision 2, and we're going to do a delete lower and delete higher. And what this is going to do, we're going to use this object as our dummy object to kind of use with the insert mesh brush and then delete it. So we have it just only this part visible on our object here. We're going to come to the brush menu, or just hit B. And then we're going to hit I to isolate all the insert mesh brushes, and we're going to choose this insert multi-mesh curve brush. Now once you have this loaded, we're going to hit M, which will show you all the insert mesh brushes that exist in this actual brush. So we want this chain with base. So we're just going to click that quick. And now we can take this and drag it on our model, and a chain should update. Now, off the start, it's going to come in very small, so we want to increase our brush size. So we want to make sure it's not on the blue circle, but on the red circle, and we're just going to increase our brush size or our draw size up here. And then we're just going to click on the thing again to update. And you can keep doing this until you get the size of the kind of chain you want on this object. If you want your pendant in view while you do this, just come back over here and just click the eyeball icon, which will turn on all the objects. So you can kind of see now how large that chain is in relation to your pendant. Now with this selected, we can now go back to the blue circle here and just kind of reposition our chain. If we want to make it longer, we can actually just come in and just drag this off here. Just kind of grow it out because we want it a little bit longer than it was. So we're going to use this just to kind of visualize how the pendant would look on our chain here. And then we're just going to position this off and up a little bit and just kind of tweak it some to make it look like it's around, you know, somebody's neck. When we framed it with for rendering, we'd frame it something like this so you don't see those two end points. But for right now, it looks pretty good. We can actually just tweak this a little bit. So something like that. Now with this generated, we're now going to go to the Move brush and drag a transpose line up and just kind of move this. And go to the side and draw a transpose line and hold Shift and move it. And so now that chain is going through that top loop of that actual object. So something like that. And we can rotate it some if we want, and turn off perspective and rotate it back a little bit. And then go to the transpose line move and move it up or down just slightly to kind of give it the feel that it's actually attached to that chain some. So something like that. Now we're going to go back to the draw menu. And now since if we go to solo, you'll see that we have the chain and then we have this temporary object that we use to actually determine where the chain was going to go. So we need to get rid of this temp object. So to do this quick, I'm just going to change my brush size down again. It's very large at the moment. I'm just going to hold Control Shift and click once to isolate just that loop. Since this loop had two polygroups, I need to hold Control Shift to click again and isolate that, and then Control Shift click again to remove that. So now I should only have the chain left on the object. So now if I come down here to the Modify Topology and do Delete Hidden, I should now only have the chain as the subtool. That little dummy mesh I used to actually generate the chain is now gone. You can still see I still have a curve line here. That's because I'm still in an insert brush. So I'm just going to click back here and go back to Standard. And if your curve line is still hanging out, you can come up here to Stroke, Curve Functions, and then just hit Delete. So now that curve's gone. So now with this chain, the only portion visible, and it's you can see how it's low res, and we kind of want that smooth. I can now divide this now, and it's going to give me this nice kind of smooth chain. So if I turn off solo now, so now I have our pendant kind of hanging on a chain. If you want the chain to be like thicker than it is right now, you come down to the Deformation tab and do an inflate. And so we'll inflate the chain as well. So if you want it to be a little bit thicker chain, you can do that. If it's more of the pendant there, maybe a little bit too much, we'll do it just a slight bit. So that's about an inflate of 13. And so you end up with something like that, which looks pretty good. And if you just isolate that, those top parts out, you can start seeing how your pendant will look. And then you hit BPR real quick to render it. So you start getting your kind of pendant with chain kind of going here. Now one more thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add some metal grain to the actual elements here. And to do that, I'm just going to merge all these kind of together really quick to give our pendant, all the metal in the pendant as one subtool and then the jewel as its own subtool. So to do this, I'm just going to make sure I only have the pendant portions, the metal portions of the pendant visible. So first I'm going to just select, say, the border part, so that's highlighted. I'm going to hide the chain, and I'm going to hide the jewels. So I just end up with this piece of the object. Now this object's pretty low, so my total points for the entire model isn't even 1,000,000 polygons. So that means I can merge them together pretty much without any trouble. So I'm going to come here and just do a merge visible. And what that's going to do is going to generate a new subtool, a new tool up here with all those pieces merged together. So I'm going to take that now and just append that to my original tool here, like so. And it should come in at the bottom. So now I can select that, turn off the visibility, so that's the only thing visible there. I can now turn on my chain and turn back on my jewel. And so now that I have all those metal pieces as one subtool, I can now use the surface noise to kind of add a little bit of roughness to it. So I'm going to scroll down here to surface. I'm going to turn on the noise modifier here. I'm going to position it so I can see it. And this has the same transpose or view options as ZBrush, the main window, does. I'm going to adjust the scale here, just kind of get this noise to be a little bit larger so you can actually see it some. Now you can set up your own masking or load in your own noise if you want, but for this one I'm just going to do the default that's on it from the start and just kind of size it up till it gets a little texture to the surface of that model, and then just hit OK. And so now you can see it's kind of got that rough surface to it. Now I can go through and add a different matte cap to it. So if I come over and select any of these metal ones that are preloaded with ZBrush, or you can download some off the matte cap library on Pixologic site. Now I'm going to jump ahead here and just show the version that has a few more minutes of sculpting on it. So I went and actually came through and kind of redid the weave around the edges here to make it less symmetrical, and then I just put the chain around the neck of this one of my base models here, and so you end up with something that kind of looks like this. So these panel loops in ZBrush 405 are extremely powerful, so don't just think of them as only being used for armor plating on models. They can be used for a wide range of things. So one great venue for them is actually using them to generate kind of jewelry assets. So they work really well for any of the open work kind of stuff you would like to create on any model. You just literally make your outer structure and then apply your panel loops, and you get this nice kind of feel to objects inside of ZBrush. Well, I hope that helps, and stay tuned for more videos on Z Classroom. Happy ZBrushing.